The story of Gethsemane is a deeply moving and significant part of the New Testament, primarily chronicled in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It details the events leading up to Jesus' crucifixion, highlighting his emotional turmoil and commitment to fulfilling God's plan. Here's a comprehensive narrative based on those biblical accounts. The setting. After sharing the Last Supper with his disciples, where he instituted the practice of communion and foretold his betrayal, Jesus and his followers went to the Garden of Gethsemane. Located at the foot of the Mount of Olives, Gethsemane, which means oil press, was a familiar place for Jesus, where he often went to pray and seek solitude. It was late at night, and the air was thick with anticipation and dread as the weight of the coming events loomed heavily upon him. Jesus' request for vigilance. As they entered the garden, Jesus instructed his disciples to sit, while he went further to pray. He took Peter, James, and John with him, sharing his distress. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said in Matthew 26 minutes and 38 seconds. He asked them to remain awake and keep watch with him, aware of the impending trials he was about to face, the agony of prayer. Jesus withdrew a short distance from his disciples, fell on his face to the ground, and began to pray earnestly. In his prayer, he cried out, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Matthew 26-39, Luke 20-42. The cup represented the suffering and sacrifice he was about to endure. In this moment of deep agony, he wrestled with the weight of humanity's sin and the impending separation from God that he would experience on the cross. The disciples sleep. After his initial prayer, Jesus returned to find his disciples sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked in Matthew 26 minutes and 40 seconds. He encouraged them to stay awake and pray, so they would not fall into temptation, recognizing the weakness of the flesh. This pattern repeated as Jesus went away to pray 2 more times, returning each time to find them asleep. In Luke 20-44, it is noted that Jesus prayed so fervently that his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground, illustrating the intense spiritual and emotional struggle he faced. The arrival of Judas. After 3 intense prayers, Jesus returned to his disciples one final time and told them to sleep on, as the time for his betrayal had arrived. At that moment, Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, arrived with a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent by the chief priests and elders. Judas approached Jesus and betrayed him with a kiss, identifying him to the authorities. "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" Jesus asked in Luke 20-48, exposing the depth of Judas' betrayal. The arrest of Jesus. As the crowd seized Jesus, one of the disciples, identified as Peter, in John 18-10, drew his sword and struck the ear of Malchus, the high priest's servant. Jesus quickly intervened, telling Peter to put his sword away, saying, "For all who draw the sword will die by the sword." Matthew 26-52. He then touched Malchus's ear and healed him. Luke 20-51, demonstrating his compassion even in the face of betrayal. Fulfillment of prophecy. Jesus addressed the crowd, asking why they had come to arrest him if he were a bandit. "Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me," he said in Matthew 26-55. He made it clear that the events unfolding were part of God's predetermined plan, fulfilling the prophecies concerning the Messiah's suffering. The disciples' desertion. In the midst of the chaos, all of Jesus' disciples fled and deserted him. Matthew 26-56. Their fear and confusion at the betrayal and arrest of their teacher demonstrated their human vulnerability. What had begun as a night of camaraderie and teaching ended in fear and abandonment. The events in Gethsemane illustrate the profound human and divine nature of Jesus. He faced the agony of the cross with earnest prayer and a desire for God's will to be done, even as he experienced deep sorrow and distress. The disciples' inability to remain awake and their eventual abandonment highlight the struggles of faith and the need for vigilance in times of trial. The Garden of Gethsemane serves as a pivotal moment in the story of Jesus, revealing the depth of his commitment to humanity's salvation and setting the stage for his sacrificial death on the cross. Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples, played a significant role during the events in Gethsemane and in the subsequent events leading to Jesus' crucifixion. Here's a detailed account of what Peter did during this critical time. Accompanied Jesus to Gethsemane. After the Last Supper, Peter, along with James and John, accompanied Jesus to the Garden of Gethsemane, while the other disciples stayed back. These three were chosen by Jesus to be closer to him as he prayed. This signifies Peter's position as one of Jesus' inner circle, promised loyalty. Earlier that night, during the Last Supper, Peter boldly declared his loyalty to Jesus, stating that even if all the other disciples fell away, he would not. In Matthew 26-33, he says, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." Jesus, however, prophesied that Peter would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed. Matthew 26-34, witnessed Jesus' distress. In Gethsemane, Peter witnessed Jesus in deep anguish as he prayed, asking God if it was possible for the cup representing his impending suffering to be taken away from him. Despite this turmoil, Peter and the other disciples fell asleep 3 times, while Jesus prayed. Matthew 26-40, 43. Mark 14:37-40. Drew his sword. When Judas arrived with a crowd to arrest Jesus, Peter reacted impulsively. In John 18-10, it states that Peter drew his sword and struck the ear of Malchus, the high priest's servant. This act was both a demonstration of his loyalty to Jesus and an attempt to protect him from arrest. Jesus' rebuke. After Peter attacked Malchus, Jesus rebuked him, telling him to put away the sword, saying, "For all who draw the sword will die by the sword." Matthew 26-52. Jesus then performed a miracle by healing Malchus' ear. 20-51. This moment highlighted that Jesus' mission was not to fight back or resist through violence, but to fulfill his purpose through sacrifice. Followed Jesus at a distance. After Jesus was arrested, Peter initially followed at a distance, wanting to see what would happen next. Luke 20-54. This was a critical moment, as he was torn between fear for his safety and the desire to stay close to Jesus. Denied Jesus. Peter's most notable action during this period was his denial of Jesus. As Jesus was being tried, Peter was confronted 3 times about his association with Jesus. Each time, he denied knowing him. First denial, a servant girl recognized him and said, "This man was with Jesus." Peter denied it, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about." Matthew 26-69-70. Second denial, another person recognized him and said, "You also are one of them." Peter denied it again, this time swearing, "I don't know the man." Matthew 26-71-72. Third denial, a bystander insisted, "Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away." Peter called down curses and swore, "I don't know the man." Matthew 26-73-74. At that moment, the rooster crowed, fulfilling Jesus' prediction of Peter's denial, wept bitterly. After realizing what he had done, Peter remembered Jesus' words and was filled with remorse. According to Matthew 26-75, he went outside and wept bitterly, overwhelmed with guilt and sorrow for denying his Lord. Peter's actions during the events of Gethsemane and the subsequent arrest of Jesus reflect his complex character. He displayed bravery by attempting to defend Jesus, yet he also exhibited fear and weakness by denying him 3 times. Peter's journey from denial to restoration becomes a significant theme in his later life, as he ultimately became a bold leader of the early church. Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples, had a transformative journey after the events surrounding Jesus' arrest, crucifixion, and resurrection. Here's a detailed account of what happened to Peter after those pivotal moments. Peter's denial. After denying Jesus 3 times during the trial, Peter was filled with remorse. He wept bitterly, feeling the weight of his failure and guilt for abandoning his Lord during a critical moment. Matthew 26-75. This denial was a moment of great personal crisis for Peter. Witnessing the crucifixion, Peter was likely present during the crucifixion of Jesus, although the Gospels do not specify his exact actions during this time. The sorrow and grief he experienced were profound as he witnessed the suffering of Jesus, whom he loved and followed. Encounter with the resurrected Jesus. After Jesus' resurrection, Peter experienced a significant moment of restoration. In John 21:15-17, after his resurrection, Jesus appeared to Peter and the other disciples while they were fishing. During this encounter, Jesus asked Peter 3 times if he loved him. Each time Peter affirmed his love, and Jesus commanded him to feed my sheep. This exchange symbolically restored Peter, counteracting his 3 denials and reinstating him as a leader among the disciples. Pentecost and the birth of the church. Following the ascension of Jesus, Peter emerged as a prominent leader of the early church. On the day of Pentecost, Acts 2, Peter boldly preached to the crowds in Jerusalem, explaining the significance of Jesus' death and resurrection. His sermon led to the conversion of about 3,000 people, marking a pivotal moment in the establishment of the Christian church. Miracles and ministry. Peter performed many miracles during his ministry. In Acts 3, he healed a lame man at the temple gate called Beautiful, which drew attention to the power of Jesus' name. His ministry was characterized by bold preaching, miracles, and the growth of the early Christian community. Persecution and trials. As the early church grew, Peter and the apostles faced persecution from religious authorities. In Acts 4, Peter and John were arrested and brought before the Sanhedrin, but boldly testified about Jesus. Despite being threatened, they continued to preach the gospel. Visions and the Gentile Mission. Peter received a vision in Acts 10 that profoundly changed the direction of his ministry. God showed him that the gospel was for all people, not just the Jews. He was directed to the house of Cornelius, a Gentile, and he preached the gospel to him and his household, leading to their conversion. This event was significant in the early church's mission to include Gentiles. Peter's leadership. Peter played a crucial role in the Jerusalem Council, as recorded in Acts 15. The council addressed the question of whether Gentile converts needed to follow Jewish law. Peter argued that salvation comes through the grace of Jesus, and his perspective helped shape the church's direction regarding Gentile believers. Writings. Peter is traditionally believed to be the author of 2 New Testament letters, 1 Peter and 2 Peter. These letters address various issues within the early church, including encouragement amidst suffering, the importance of faith, and warnings against false teachers, martyrdom, Tradition holds that Peter was martyred in Rome around AD 64 during the reign of Emperor Nero. According to early Christian writings, Peter requested to be crucified upside down, feeling unworthy to die in the same manner as Jesus. His martyrdom solidified his legacy as one of the foremost leaders and figures of the Christian faith. Peter's journey after the denial of Jesus was one of profound transformation, restoration, and leadership. He moved from a state of failure and sorrow to becoming a bold proclaimer of the gospel, playing a pivotal role in the early church's growth and mission. His legacy endures through his teachings, leadership, and ultimate sacrifice for his faith. Peter certainly experienced deep regret and sorrow after denying Jesus. Here's a closer look at Peter's feelings of regret, as well as his journey towards restoration. Immediate regret. After Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times during his trial, the Gospel of Matthew records that Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly." Matthew 26-75. This moment of weeping indicates a profound sense of remorse and regret for his actions. The realization of his failure to stand by Jesus in a critical moment was emotionally overwhelming for him. Feelings of guilt and shame. Peter's regret likely involved feelings of guilt and shame. Having been one of Jesus' closest disciples, he had confidently professed his loyalty and dedication to Jesus. When he denied knowing him, it was not only a betrayal of their relationship, but also a complete reversal of his earlier promises. This would have created a deep sense of unworthiness and shame in Peter. Restoration by Jesus. After Jesus' resurrection, Peter's regret was addressed in a significant way. In John 21:15-17, Jesus asked Peter 3 times if he loved him, giving Peter the opportunity to reaffirm his love and commitment. Each affirmation corresponded to one of Peter's earlier denials. This encounter was a powerful moment of restoration and healing for Peter, transforming his regret into renewed purpose and commitment to Jesus' mission. Transformation into a bold leader. Peter's regret did not paralyze him. Rather, it fueled his transformation into a bold leader of the early church. After being restored, he preached powerfully at Pentecost and played a vital role in the growth of the Christian community. His experiences of failure and subsequent restoration allowed him to empathize with others who struggled with doubt and sin, making him a compassionate and understanding leader. Legacy of regret and redemption. Peter's journey reflects a common theme in the Christian faith: the possibility of redemption and restoration after failure. His regret served as a catalyst for his transformation and leadership, and he ultimately became one of the most influential figures in the early church. His experience of falling short and being restored by Jesus offers hope to many believers who struggle with their own failures. In conclusion, Peter did indeed regret denying Jesus, experiencing profound sorrow and guilt over his actions. However, this regret led to a powerful moment of restoration with Jesus, transforming his failure into a foundation for a future leadership and ministry. His story is a testament to the grace and forgiveness available to those who seek it, demonstrating that even in moments of great failure, redemption is possible. May your spiritual journey be filled with God's grace and peace. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to inspire others on their walk with the Lord.